Let's cross to Victoria now and catch up with Liberal Senator Sarah Henderson. Thanks for joining us again, Sarah. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, has admitted that quarantine has essentially accounted for the outbreak of the virus in that state. But he suggested that he didn't ask for ADF assistance, or it wasn't offered. But documentation suggests that there's no doubt that ADF support was there early on and Victoria didn't accept it all.
Chris, good afternoon. And yes, we heard evidence by Daniel Andrews today saying that there was never any agreement or any acceptance of any offer in relation to ADF personnel, which of course was so successful in states like New South Wales and Queensland in running a hotel quarantine system with great integrity. But of course, that's now shown to be very problematic in terms of the evidence that he has given, because on the very day that the Prime Minister made an offer, the 27th of March, the Premier actually put out a media statement stating that he was very pleased to accept this help from the ADF. And I've actually got the exact quote where he says, "It has been agreed the ADF will be engaged to support the implementation of these arrangements," referring to hotel quarantine. So it's very disappointing to see this conflicting evidence from the Premier. It is very embarrassing for him. And I think Victorians have got every reason to ask, well, we want questions answered, but we want them answered with credibility and truthfully.
Now, the important thing is what's happening now, though, as well. You've got to learn those lessons as quickly as possible. But that vision today of the woman in Collingwood being grabbed around the throat by police officers for not wearing a mask, this shows surely that the implementation of these draconian laws is just too heavy-handed.
Well, Chris, I do really feel for police. They have been asked to impose laws that have never existed in our state before. But I would have to agree with you, that was very heavy-handed and it seemed to me to be totally inappropriate. We don't know what's transpired beforehand, of course, so I would reserve my judgment in that respect. But I do know that the Commissioner has said, look, police will be using a lot of discretion, and it was very regrettable that we saw that sort of conduct today.
Have the police been put in an unenviable position here? Are these laws too draconian? I know that the state Liberals and federal Liberals are trying to be bipartisan and cooperative here, but honestly, a curfew, compulsory masks, even when you're walking down an almost deserted street, this stuff seems to be way too heavy-handed when the Victorian government hasn't got the basics right.
Well, I think there is no doubt, Chris, that the Victorian government does not have the basics right. I've been speaking out for many weeks about, of course, not just hotel quarantine, but even very basic issues like the fact that we have no public health teams across regional Victoria. We've got this small centralised system in Victoria, unlike other large states like New South Wales and Queensland. And we've also got this very, very major concern with contact tracing. Today we've seen, Chris, there are some 3,000 mystery cases, and what that means is there are 3,000 cases where the Victorian Health Department does not know how that person caught coronavirus. And that is really alarming and shows that, frankly, there has been an utter failure with contact tracing, and perhaps even the Victorian government has lost control of contact tracing altogether.
Now, while the whole population, not just of Victoria, mainly in Victoria, of course, but right across the country is paying a heavy price socially and economically because of this pandemic, the real problem when it comes to fatalities has been in the aged care sector. It accounts for something more than 2/3 of the deaths in this country. And this is where the federal government, too, you've not acted soon enough to have an aged care plan in place. It was obvious from February that the elderly were going to be the most people at risk from this pandemic.
Well, Chris, firstly, let me just say very briefly, we are very proud to have delivered in excess of $300 billion of economic support, and we are working night and day to support Australians on what is a health and economic crisis. But in relation to the criticisms that have been raised in the Aged Care Royal Commission, they have been utterly rejected by the Acting Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, who's made it very clear, Chris, that there was a plan in place as from January. And we knew and have always recognised that when you have high levels of community transmission, which is what we now have in Victoria, the most vulnerable in our community will be the most likely to suffer. And that's what we have seen. And frankly, we saw the case in St Basil's where, despite the agreement entered into between the Commonwealth and Victoria, there was a failure to inform the Commonwealth for something like 5 days in relation to the issues at St Basil's. And we now, of course, really, Chris, the focus now is to try and support these aged care operators working with the Victorian government, including in deploying ADF personnel into many aged care homes, and that's even happening in my own region.
I've got to come back to this another time because we need to see more action when it comes to aged care homes and the elderly. But before I let you go, Sarah Henderson, I want to just get your thoughts about the prospect of Rebecca Sharkey in the seat of Mayo and Sterling Griff in the Senate being offered positions in the Liberal Party. Would you welcome them back? Well, not back. I shouldn't say that. Neither were actually Liberal members. But would you welcome into the government ranks because talks are underway in South Australia?
Well, I would say good luck to them. I work very hard to support the growth of the membership of the Liberal Party in Victoria, and that's very much my focus, Chris.
But Sterling Griff, you would work with him in the Senate and you'd know Rebecca Sharkey pretty well. Do you think that they'd add to the government ranks? Obviously, the numbers would be handy, but would you welcome them in? Do you think that their politics match the coalition's?
Well, look, I do work quite closely with Sterling, and I think Rebecca, also have worked with Rebecca over the years as well. As I say, we are a very welcoming party, but at the moment, Chris, we are very focused on the business of government, on the business of standing up for Australians, on getting through this pandemic. That is very much our focus, and it will continue to be. But for me here in Victoria, I would welcome all and sundry to join the great Liberal Party of Australia, Victorian Division. Indeed,
there's your spruik, calling for members. Sarah Henderson, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Chris. Thank you.